guys. I think no, it's thanks, Jerry. Okay, so Cynthia. Before I even start this one, this girl just renamed Discord on her parents' phone. Her battery died. It's okay. Oh, I need that level of yeah. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Oh, it's already evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cynthia. I'm going to be your chair for this round. I'll let my amazing fantabulous darling partner introduce himself before we can start the round.
Uh, my name is Darling Love Panelist. Thank you. Have a good debate.
Okay, nice. So standard WSPC rules apply. 8 minutes of speech, 4 minutes for replies. I will be dropping times. The timestamp I'll drop is the last minute and time up in the text space. So be sure to time yourself as well. But you will see that beyond 8 minutes, my darling partner and I do not really write anything. So you would just be screaming a bunch of gibberish like extended prep with no aim of winning. So all the best in the round. First speaker side affirmative. Ready when you are. Here.
Okay, Chair, am I audible?
Yes, you are loud and clear.
Um, okay, I think I'll be doing first speech, the summary, bad luck with battery, and also this the place I am in right now is also funny. So in case I break, please do notify me. With that said, preference like do I preference or vote for it?
Um, Samri, you are already breaking, unfortunately.
With that said, I think I'll set my speech in three. An evolving world with something paramount. Wow. Wow. Okay, let's see if I can. Um, am I breaking?
Samra,
One,
wait.
two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight.
Samra,
Yeah.
wait.
Trying to read out the motion.
Disconnect from Discord,
Yeah.
right? And then close the app in the background and then come back on the
Okay.
app.
Okay, on it.
Say, man of solutions.
I'm just trying to be a helpful panelist to you.
Oh, darling, thank you so much. What would I do without you?
Ah, man, you would still be thriving. Eh? I'm but a pawn at your disposal.
Oh, good. You are but the king that makes a queen, the prince that makes a princess.
Okay, now that's a buy.
The lord
You know you're on stream. I was just gonna say. Also, the worst case is that she's probably going to come on and her network will be a bit jumpy. We'll just let her continue.
Okay, sure.
Okay, I did what you said. An ID card. This house would pursue vocational education over a traditional college degree. Is
Of
that
course,
clear?
a kid's solutions always work. Yes, extremely clear.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to start my speech in three, two, one. Check. In a constant evolving world where individuals do need the high demand skills and practicability to actually sustain their life, is something we prone for. We think from our side of the house, pursuing vocational education over traditional college ground is something we are so proud to propose. What are you going to get within my speech? First, how do we account for our model? Oh, no, this is a policy motion. That means that we are going to show you why our model. How this looks like is A, where we have cost-friendly like vocational education, which can actually be accessible to the vast majority of people within society. But then two, we're able to actually have great investment in vocation, like i.e. investing within vocational institutions by bringing expertise into these institutions to actually equip skills, like to actually equip students with better skills. But then thirdly, also availing internships and many scholarships to actually incentivize students and actually incentivize students to go ahead and pursue vocational at the end of the day. Understand, chair, the how like individuals would probably react from our side is like something would explain. That means that for these individuals within this policy, that people who would actually react towards it in a positive way. Why is then there a greater likelihood for them to actually act or like take it in positively? One, we think that the employment opportunities they're able to get is something that is able to actually help them to improve their standards of living, where they necessarily don't have to wait in line for a white collar job. But then two, they're able to actually get those skills for them to go ahead and create these jobs and probably be creative and innovative in their various areas. But then three, they're able to self-actualize because they're able to be happy in terms of how they're able to support their families in the vast majority of cases. Panel before that. And that's not a problem we have within status quo. It's a societal perception that is like that exists within society that, oh, if you probably don't have a traditional college degree or you necessarily don't pursue it, you're deemed to be not important, you're deemed to be not seen as great. That great pressure that inherently is created within this, that individuals have to actually go ahead to take on that degree. Even low income individuals are pushed to this alternative. At a point in time, even if they are not equipped or probably don't have the resources, they're forced to go and get those student loans at the end of the day, with no guarantee that they're going to get a job at the end of the day. We think that even if they have natural abilities to actually do something great without them going for a traditional college degree, we think that this is quite limited because they're going to inherently be seen as losers in society. That is not a world we want. How then does this vocational education look like? We think one, these are education systems that inherently cooperate individuals to go ahead and take practical skills. How can you bake a cake? How can you fix a broken wire? How can you fix a domestic water supply at the end of the day? But then two, this is like a sort of system where you have a hands-on experience. At a time like when you're able to actually work together in terms of how you're able to actually fix a domestic water supply and having an on hands experience on how to actually fix those tubes and unscrew those nuts in the vast majority of cases, you actually come collaboratively as a team. So I think that even when opposition wants to say, oh, you necessarily don't get the soft skills or communication skills, or probably that teamwork inherently probably would exist within a traditional degree, is something so that we couldn't expect them to actually run that. But then thirdly, we actually have a system where people and individuals are able to exploit their talents or abilities that they prefer and can see they would prefer. At a point in time when you always have this narrative within society that the traditional college degree is something important, you always have individuals deemed to go for these college degrees, even when they have an ability to create a car, even when they have an ability to actually be the best mechanic within the village, they still can't go for it because society sees them as losers. If you probably ditch a traditional college sort of degree, the vast majority of cases. But then thirdly, understand Pano that at a point in time, this vocational education is something that gives you and avails you with shorter programs. That means at a point in time you can go for a certificate, you can go for a diploma, and you get equipped with those skills. Why this is very advantageous is that the countries or the societies they come from, where you have saturated unemployment, poor standards of living, and low income families that don't have any meal to actually depend on depend or probably have each and every day. You necessarily need a shorter program to actually get yourself with those skills and probably go and look for that job in the vast majority of cases. The shortness within these programs is actually very advantageous at the end of the day. But then lastly and most importantly is that it has less tuition in comparison to a traditional college degree. Go to Harvard, go to like to Makerere, you pay like over like 1 million on tuition. But as like St. Peter's Vocational College, where you're able to actually learn plumbing, it's like 300K. At a point in time, even when those Makerere students or Harvard students probably graduate, it's very unlikely for them to actually go ahead and probably get that job on spot as compared to you can actually start it up even in your own garage or kitchen. What then does this traditional college degree look like? It looks like where individuals are capitalized to be as smart people. They are always prepared for this white collar job, and you must have attended a university. That probably like how probably you have to attend those university lectures the vast majority of cases. Why this is very detrimental is that it's always financial constraining. Even if Op says that all scholarships are probably given, there are very few people who actually access the scholarships. But then too, there are very many people who are actually going and probably studying for that same degree. So you're going to go for like an interview, and there are around 1,000 individuals who are looking for that post, probably being probably a supervisor law in some law firm, the vast majority of cases. But then also, you need a lot of much time for you to cover these degrees and lectures. That means you're going to have like 4 or 5 years. At a point in time when your family doesn't have money, doesn't have, it doesn't like your siblings are still waiting for you, it means that you necessarily can't equip them and probably aid them in the vast majority of cases. With that panel, we show you a theoretical pumped education is something that marginalized communities and a society where there's a saturated unemployment and no guarantee for these individuals to get these jobs is something unlikely for these people to take. And that is why, from our side of the house, we still like we win on those metrics within setup. Why do we then, from outside of the house, able to actually cater for marginalized and low income families? Panel, understand that the majority of individuals within society are people who are financially constrained. That means they don't have resources, but then also these are individuals who necessarily have to depend on 1 meal per day. We tell you at a point in time when they fail to actually access this education, one, they are forced to go beyond limits to get that money. But even secondly, you also increase the likelihood of dropouts in the vast majority of cases. And once you become a dropout, it's very unlikely for them to actually go for vocational education because they already give you analysis on the societal perception that already exists within society and why that is bad. But then thirdly, but also due to the societal perception, it's going to continuously disincentivize like these individuals to take other education alternatives. We tell you, these are individuals who need urgent help and urgent way to improve their lives in the vast majority of cases. There are people who are dying in the shackles of poverty and they need help within that. From our side of the house, Glenn is going to try and expand on why we're able to solve the saturated unemployment that is very detrimental within society. We tell you, very many people have those jobs and very many people have those degrees. What makes you unique? What can you do outside that, outside that degree? But also, how are you able to actually sustainably like help your family in the vast majority of cases? What do I do within my speech? I think it's a clear characterization on one how our model looks like and why we're able to actually bring in very many people into the vocational like education. But then two, actually why traditional college degree like it's actually very bad for individuals because one, it takes a lot of time, it's theoretically pumped education, but you also have to actually have attended a university which is usually financially constrained. We tell you from our side of the house how the society is shaped, marginalized and low income families is the context we necessarily extend set within the debate. With that I couldn't be more proud to propose. Shall I vote prop? Iris.
Okay, we thank the speaker for that speech. We welcome the first speaker from side opposition to respond of Ben's case. Here.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry for that to be the opening sound you're listening to. Um, I'm supposed to be judged on a law, but because my teammate decided to be a rich kid and leave the country, I'm also going to be doing second speech and reply, I think. Yeah, give me a second to set my timer and great. Sorry, I had to cough that out. I'm starting my speech now. So I think a few key points of characterization that Samra with essentially misses out and why it's particularly important. A, it's not necessarily what the ideal picture of vocational institutions essentially look like, right? We think one, it's important to notice that the skills that are taught within vocational institutions are essentially specialized. That is to say, if I want to learn bakery, that is only what I'm going to learn, right? The impact of this characterization is what one, to show you how it's limited, it limits transferable skills, right? But then secondly, you have to notice that within vocational institutions, there's also minimal theoretical foundation thoughts. The impact of this is to show you that the kids or like the people that go within these particular things are rarely taught principles in and of itself. That's why the courses are short in the first place. I'm going to show you what matters, right? But then secondly, in characterization, because she fails to engage the comparative, it is important to note that the one extrinsic, the one like exclusive thing that exists with traditional colleges is one, they are broad. It has some sort of like broad learning, right? That essentially means soft skills like leadership, teamwork, time management, and networking in and of itself are things that are taught within them. Even as much as summary tries to show you why it doesn't matter, I'm going to show you why it does matter later on in my case. But then secondly, and then lastly, on characterization, right, on the nature of the job market. We think within status quo, there's a rapidly changing job market in and of itself, right? We think that essentially looks like one, like priorities of people shifting to like certain things like skills like communication and like networking and all these particular things. I'm going to show you why that only exists on the side of the house. But then secondly, there's adoption of machinery and an automation within the job market. Again, I'm going to show you why that is essentially detrimental on the side of the house. But last but not leastly, society still prioritizes college degrees and stuff when it comes to like employment in and of itself. But then mostly within the job market, right? We think even for vocational institutions to thrive within status quo right now, because of the level of competition that exists within the job market, you have to be affiliated with a certain organization. That essentially means if I'm learning braids, if I want to actualize and maximize my benefits, like Summer Which argues, I have to be affiliated to Braided by Malika. That essentially means if I don't have things like communication skills and all these particular things, I am less likely to be employed and accrue the benefits that Summer Which says she's going to get from the side of the house, right? But let me do a lot of engagement, right? Summer Which comes and says that, hey, we think that on our side of the house, you're going to have like a cost-friendly model. We're going to have some sort of like investment, internships, and scholarships in and of itself. I think it becomes rather self-defeating to an extent where she argues that society has a bad perception of these particular vocational institutions. She does not show to us clearly why, just because fees is cheaper, my attitude towards learning carpentry and welding in and of itself will shift. We think you can't buy into that frame, right? But then secondly, she talks about like the idea of like more of how like the self-actualization existing because people explore their talents in and of itself. Notice panel within traditional colleges, we still have people exploring their talents. I mean, that's why we have things like sports scholarships existing in the first place. We think that this particular argument is essentially cross-sectional. We don't get why that essentially happens on the side of the house, right? And then she talks about, or hey, we're going to talk about we're talking about this because of like marginalized communities, because like there's a high level of unsaturated unemployment. Notice panel, unsaturated unemployment is like largely in these marginalized communities because of key things like one, low literacy levels. That is why we would prefer these particular people to go to these traditional colleges so that they acquire the skills to increase the competence in like the job market in and of itself, right? But then secondly, on the whole idea of marginalized communities in and of itself, right? She talks about the whole idea of expenses, right? We think panel the mechanisms within status quo to opt out of these problems, things looks like scholarships in and of itself. Even if you argue that not everyone is able to access scholarships, we still think that the things that exist that can fund your education, things like student loans in and of itself, we still think that this particular thing can essentially work, right? But even when someone would argue that, oh, you're going to force people to work well studying, I'm still going to show you why this particular thing inherently becomes beneficial to an extent where I'm able to learn certain things, or I'm able to like learn how to actualize in and of itself by controlling two jobs, right? So panel, what are you going to get from our side of the house particularly, and why we wouldn't prefer this particular world, especially within the frame, right? We think on like basically two folds, right? Our case is going to run from one, the intrinsic impacts of like preferring like college education, but two also like on an extrinsic level, which is going to come in as an extension in second space, right? On extrinsic impacts panel, we think it's just simple on the whole idea of career trajectory, right? We think one, at a point in time where you opt into college education or traditional colleges, there's some sort of like flexibility that then exists on your side of the house. The premise of this argument is that this particular education, traditional colleges, provide a broader foundation for people to learn in and of itself. That is because you teach other skills like communication, teach like the analytical skills in and of itself, right? We think this particular thing then enables people to, or enable students or people to adopt to changing job markets. This is true because traditional college provides like a broader learning experiences like critical thinking, analysis, communication in and of itself, right? The impact of this is that it advances, it enhances adaptability in the changing job, right? Notice this is why my frame becomes important. With the changing job market, you have to essentially be versatile to like continue like earning income or like continue getting some benefits, right? We think that sort of like adaptability can only exist with the skills that you get from these particular things. Notice again, in framing and characterization, I am able to show you how vocational skills in and of itself become specific in nature. That means that you're limiting your transferability and adaptability in and of itself to like the changing job market. We think that's something we don't want to co-opt into. We think it becomes inherently bad, especially for a bad society that Samarit already characterizes, right? But then on a comparative, right, we think vocational institution limits a student's career options in the long run. That essentially looks like A, getting when I'm trying to get jobs, or B, when I'm trying to get a promotion. Notice most high paying institutions or high paying entities within status quo essentially still require degrees in and of itself. The impact of this is to show you that on the opposite proposition side of the house, on a comparative, you're more likely to stay in a low paying job in and of itself because you don't have these particular degrees. Like Summer, which shows you the attitude towards these particular things are essentially bad. We don't get how they change that attitude in and of itself from the side of the house, right? That essentially means that for the people she's like advertising for, or like she's like opting for, you essentially like lead them to have like low paying jobs and less opportunities for further advancements because they don't have these skills, they don't have these papers that people actually require to advance them. The impact of this is essentially people get to continue living a low quality standard of living in and of itself, which Summer which already characterizes you and shows you why it's essentially bad. So how do we solve this issue on our side of the house? Pano, I think to an extent where you're able to teach skills that are going to enhance people's ability to adapt to adapt to the changing job market in and of itself, you then get this particular sort of like flexibility that essentially means my skills are less likely going to be replaced by a robot because there are robots who can do building there's like a lot of machinery in and of itself, but because of the actual the more intrinsic like benefit, the more intrinsic skills that I got through traditional technical skills in and of itself, or like traditional colleges in and of itself, I am less likely to like I'm less likely to like not get this particular job, right? So what have I been able to show? Essentially, one, how the frame that Summer Wit essentially gives you is self-defeating in a way that they're unable to change attitudes towards this particular thing. But then secondly, on the high levels of unemployment, we address the core issues as to why the unemployment exists in the first place and how we essentially make the world better for these particular people who have never been proud to oppose. I rest my case.
Hi, guys. You will forgive my lovely chair. I will thank you for that lovely speech, first opposition speaker. Let's extend the debate to the second proposition speaker. Here.
Hi, hope I'm audible.
Loud and clear.
Okay, my days. Um, I'll start my speech in three, two, one. I think firstly, I need to do a bit of clarity on the last piece of argumentation that Samarit gives in her speech. One, she comes out and tells you that we cater for middle class people or people who are poorer and cannot necessarily access the resources to go to these colleges. What we hear from Lamaro is this whole idea that they concede that people have this sort of conservative nature, but we don't change that whatsoever. We don't do any sort of variation in what's happening in status quo. I'm going to show you why that's necessarily true and why we solve that whole idea. Firstly, what did she come out and say? She says that one, there's a sort of demonization of these people who don't have degrees. Why? At a point in time in which people are conservative and have this sort of glorification of those who have degrees. For example, they're the ones viewed as more prominent, they're the ones who are viewed as more important, or the Albert Einsteins of our world, since they're highly given respect and glorified by the conservative nature of people in it to be self in status quo, right? Secondly, this particularly becomes important because we tell you people have huge priority on stuff like societal perception. At a point in time which I have more likelihood of doing things such that I get this societal perception, such that I'm glorified by these conservative people, we feel like this E to itself coerces these people into wanting to get these degrees. What does Lamaro tell you? That yes, even if they're poor, they can still get student loans. Why does that particularly become problematic? And why is it already framed out in Samarit's speech? She tells you at a point in time in which you incur debt for actually an education that does not give you a certainty that you're going to get this job, it becomes particularly problematic. And I'm going to extend on this on why I'm not likely to get this job later in my speech. One, which it becomes problematic because you're being card a debt, you're on a student loan, you have to pay it back, but yet you're not getting any money simply because of the fact that you're less likely to get employed. Secondly, even if you're employed, you have a world whereby, hey, you have a lot of student loans and you have to pay them back at a point in time which this lowers your quality of life. Why? Because you don't have the ability to maximize your utility. You don't have a lot of money to just waste away since your priority is to pay back these loans. It even becomes more problematic because they come out and say that, hey, a lot of people buy into these college degrees. So this then does look like the only way I'm going to be unique in this world is by getting the best education. That's why people go to Harvard. That's why people probably go to Makerere in Uganda. At a point in time which this becomes problematic because these people don't have the resources to do so. This looks like a world whereby either you are have a world whereby they have to pay back these loans and are living a low quality of life. Secondly, the whole idea that it's less likely that this person is going to get that occupation and thus they have a huge loan on their back. Second reason or second option for them, you don't go for these jobs and just face the stigma, face the demonization at the end of the day. At a point in time which are more likely to be demonized because you don't have a degree because of the whole ideology that people hold much respect and much priority to those with the degrees. Why do we solve that? And I feel like this is very engaging on what Lamaro says in her speech. We solve that simply because of the fact that we have more people going for these vocational skills. What does this look like? As said by Samarit, our model looks like much more people, our majority of people in status quo actually having incentive to go for these vocational skills. At a point in time which many people are going for these vocational skills, there's much more likelihood that you break down the conservative barriers exist at the status quo. Why? Because you cannot say that this is bad. You cannot demonize them, yet a lot of people are going for them. Secondly, we feel like even if that's not necessarily true, our side still becomes comparatively better because you reduce the financial burden. And this is something Samarit spends a huge chunk of her time in her speech, right? Explaining that one, at a point in time which our world is much more affordable because you don't have to pay exacerbated tuition fees such that you get an education, such that you have this sort of likelihood of getting a job. We feel like that in and of itself is something important in this debate, just an extension. Secondly, for a rebuttal on what she comes out and says, that soft skills are not existent in our world. I feel like one, they are existent in our world, and the whole chat on soft skills is highly symmetric. Why? At a point in time which things like probably learning vocational skills, they teach you stuff like communication. Come on, they teach you stuff like teamwork because it's highly logical for her to come out and say that, hey, I just teach you how to make tables and I leave you there. No, at a point in time which I actually have to teach you how to capitalize on these skills, this looks like you getting stuff like communication such that you can market your products. We feel like that's something that already comes in Samarit's model of how this looks like. Into argumentation, right? One, notice at a point in time which we actually solve the problem in status quo, we feel like we have already won this entirety of this debate. Lamaro's speech only becomes relevant if you get that job. Why is this necessarily true? Notice unemployment is much more likely on their side simply because of the fact that there's a saturation of people going for that degree. Why? I give you an analysis of the conservative nature of people in status quo. This looks like parents indoctrinating ideas like you can only be successful, you can only be damn relevant if you get a doctorate or if you get a degree. This becomes problematic because the moment I even went out of my mom's womb, they are telling me I should become a doctor. At a point in time which you keep on having that ideology, this increasingly incentivizes you to go for these jobs. Second piece of justification here, we tell them that they're coerced into doing so by society. Why? The point in time which these people care about societal perception, probably because it maximizes their utility. I feel happiest if you guys say that I'm a good debater. That's why I care so much about how much you perceive me. This looks like a world whereby no, there's this looks like a world whereby there's a sort of glorification or respect given to people with these college degrees. Why does this particularly become important? Because at a point in time, with this continuously incentivizes people to go for traditional college degrees. This looks like a world whereby even if you don't have the financial capacity to do so, you're coerced into living into that world. Why is that particularly bad? Intuitively speaking, they are not limitless job spots. We don't run a river of infinite employment opportunities. I don't feel like that's what's happening in status quo. The impact analysis here is two things. One, the most proximate impact is you feel discontented with yourself. I feel like this is very important in this debate. Why is this likely to happen? One, the whole priority that you gave on getting a college degree at a point in time, which is less likely for me to actually outcompete everybody because there's sincerely nothing unique about me. Everybody has the same skills, everybody has the same qualifications. At a point in time which I don't get this job, I feel discontented because I've held much priority and I've been indoctrinated into believing this idea that the moment you get a college degree, that's a certainty of employment. So I feel discontented with myself. I feel like I'm the anomaly, that something's different with me. Secondly, I feel discontented because I'm more likely to be perceived by society as somebody who got a degree, yet I'm a failure. That becomes bad because you're worsening the mental health of this person. Second piece of analysis on why this is the highest impact. After this, I'll take your POI. Notice, at a point in time which unemployment is there, the most intuitive impact is that their world where you have huge loan debts and stuff like that, you're not able to pay them off. That means you live a poor quality of life because even if you get the job, there are priorities to pay off those loans, to pay off the debts you did. You're not able to maximize utility because you can't really do things without anything else. Secondly, if you don't get employed, most intuitive thing, you don't have money, you probably have coins in your pocket. At a point in time which you're not able to actually get basic amenities, we feel like that into itself is simple justification as to why there's a poor quality of life. On the comparative analysis, why does our world simply become better on this particular piece of argumentation? Notice, at a point in time in which there's less saturation of people going for vocational skills. Why? Because it's not necessarily as coerced or it's not necessarily as popularized or given this sort of glorification that I've already explained in status quo. Secondly, the certainty of people actually getting employment because you have unique skills. I feel like an important analysis that comes from Samarit's speech is the uniqueness of the skills you get. One, there's sort of creativity and innovation because even if you have to say we all have the same job, we all learn baking, you can't bake a cake the same way the next person does so. So creativity and innovation into itself is necessarily existent in our world. What's the impact analysis you get from this particular piece of documentation? There is more utility because you're able to actually have money. There's a certainty that you're going to get employment. This looks like a world whereby I have a much better quality of life because I at least have some money in my pocket. Okay, with that, end my speech. Sorry, I didn't take
All
your
right.
POI.
Okay. Lovely chair. Do you want to take over?
Yes, thank you so much, my darling panelist. Thank you for that speech. Let's welcome the second opposition speech. Here.
Am I still audible?
Yes, you are.
I'm going to start my speech now. Panel, up to this point in the debate, we still don't get why the conservative society that Glenn and Samra would talk about will be inclined to push people to vocational schools just because the fees is now cheaper, just because now we have incentives. Yet he also talks about how they're deeply ingrained in the narrative that you need to essentially get a college degree. We cannot buy the impacts. But even when we do buy the impacts in and of itself, right? Glenn argues that, oh, we think on opposition side of the house, you're less likely to get employed. The premise of his particular argument is that everyone has the same skills in and of itself. Notice, panel, I'm able to show you that with the competing job market, like right from first speech in and of itself, there's a sense of demand for these these raw skills. That is to say, the IT world is evolving. Doctors are needed. We need more lawyers in and of itself. That essentially shows you there's an available job market, right? The comparative, like I already showed you, we have an evolving world in and of itself. We think this also impacts the vocational sites. It impacts the vocational sites in a way that we show you that most of them most of the vocational businesses in and of itself are branded, that become big. That essentially means that they have some sort of like automation, like adoption of machinery in and of itself. That essentially means that the market is already monopolized by certain companies. So for you to essentially want to like maximize your preferences, like proposition pushes, you have to affiliate yourself with these particular companies. We tell you why. One, the profit is already limited in those particular things, but then secondly, you're less likely to get employed in those particular fields because one, these particular people already have some sense of like automation that exists. This is why my framing becomes very like important, right? To that extent, I'm able to show why unemployment is more on that side of the house. But then secondly, on how even when employment exists, the benefits are still minimal, right? Glenn talks about secondly the low quality of life because you're able to like pay, you're able to like have some like problems with like paying loans in and of itself. Notice panel, these particular loans are paid in installments. That is to say, I am not going to take all of your income, I'm just taking a proportion of your income. The impact of this essentially to show you is that the harms that essentially Glenn brings within his speech are reversible or they can be mitigated. That means that for him to argue that, oh, your standard of life is suddenly going to be poor because you're giving 10% of your money back to the loans in and of itself is like false, right? Then he basically talks about like how people, he knifes himself when he said that, oh, we think you're more likely to go to have people going for like traditional education in and of itself because of like its coercive nature. It becomes unclear to me why this coercive society in and of itself would likely then engage on that on with their side of the house, right? In and of, with the vocational institutions, right? But then secondly, notice how Glenn only runs and this is what Summerwit does, right? Only runs a comparative if people cannot go to college. This is where they argue on expenses in and of itself. But to the extent where I'm able to show why that can be mitigated, we don't think they can like this can fly in the debate, right? We think they have to also engage a comparative when traditional colleges in and of itself are accessible. We think that you cannot have a debate when no one goes to traditional skills. We feel like they're highly uncomparative on those particular like lens, right? And then basically on the idea of financial burden, right? Pano, I think I'm able to show you that even when we take them at their best, the financial burden like becomes an issue still in the long run. And basically, because he talks about like how the financial burden like reduces quality of life on that side of the house. We tell you in a comparative, when you compare both worlds, when you are able, when you're finally done with paying these particular student loans, you can continue living your life. But then secondly, with the nature of job you're able to get, you're more likely to get promotions, you're more likely to get advanced, you're more likely to be able to transfer with the changing job market. The impact of this is to show you, one, there is a constant inflow of capital, but then secondly, there's a constant increase in capital. The impact of this is to show you that the financial burden in and of itself is something that is short term and you're able to get long term benefits. Notice how within fast speech, I am able to show you that from their side of the house, you don't essentially get these particular things because one, you don't have the skills because the nature of companies still want these particular degrees. They still want to acknowledge that you've gone to school. You're less likely to get employed, you're more likely to stay in a low quality job in and of itself. You have a poor quality of life from the side of the house, right? So on extension, what do we get, right? We think there are still more like extrinsic benefits that exist with going with these particular things, right? We think firstly, we need to understand the contribution of these particular of these particular people who have gone through traditional colleges to society. We think inherently there's an like what Samarit characterizes you, there's a highly marginalized community that exists within status quo. We think that marginalization goes beyond economic constraints. We think it looks at also social like constraint and social economic constraints. That is to say, we have less doctors in hospitals, we have less engineers in and of itself, we have less lawyers. The impact of this is that even when you do have some sort of money within status quo, you are less likely to have a good standard of life because the services are not there. We tell you for the vocational institution life to thrive, it's basically a dependent variable on what we have on what we have on our side of the house, right? So you're more likely to have a better standard of life if you have the services to pay for those particular things. We think the only services that exist or the thing that you get is when people essentially when more people comparatively become doctors, when more people comparatively become lawyers, engineers, IT people in and of itself, we think that that's comparatively better for society in and of itself for like development of that particular marginalized society, right? But then secondly, on how the country essentially on like a more extrinsic level of how the country is able to engage on like in global economics in terms of the workforce, right? We think that the problem with these particular societies that Samarit characterizes within status quo is that they are unable to engage in global economics. That is to say, most countries in and of itself within these particular that have these societies more likely import expatriates. A key case is like in 2018 where Uganda had to import Cuban doctors. The impact of this is that on a global scope, you are seen as economically vulnerable because you don't have the workforce to cater for yourself. We tell you to an extent where you pursue or you largely pursue traditional colleges over these particular things, you're more competent on a global scale. That is to say, you're more able to engage in this particular global economics at a point in time where you're not asking for help in and of itself. We think one, you enable this particular country to be independent and depend on themselves, but then secondly, I'm so sorry. But then secondly, you then essentially get to like engage on a global economic scale, right? This becomes important on two folds. One, you're more likely to have some sort of like deals with when it comes to things like economics, right? In and of itself. We think that essentially becomes good because there's an inflow of capital into the country that even means that the high tuition fees that they complain for or like services that exist within these particular countries can essentially be made better or like the cost can be reduced, right? But then secondly, on a level of policy, right, we think it's more likely for other countries to back you up on economic policies in and of itself to support within your economy when you have a workforce that is one competitive on a global level. We tell you on that side of the house the skills are specialized, two, they're basically tied to like one particular thing, right? The impact of this is one, it's not competitive and it's not transferable, not only within the society, within the work, but then on a global scale. The impact of this is essentially you don't get to like to compete on a global scale, you don't get this sort of like support, which is that's an essentially bad word, right? So what have been the way ups in like the past cases in and of itself, right? I think first on the idea of employment, I think I'm able to show you why we get like we still get employment on our side of the house and why you're more likely to advance within that employment. That means even the impact of self-actualization that Glenn tries to run still exists on our side of the house. But then secondly, on the whole idea of like economic burden, I think I'm able to show you how we are able to reduce, to mitigate that economic burden. But even when you take them at that worst, how you're able to get the capacity to solve the burden in themselves. And then last but not leastly, on the whole idea of standard of life, I think Pano, the standard of life that Glenn opts for in and of itself is largely assumed that there is market for these particular things, but then they don't do analysis as to make sure that market exists. But then secondly, on how we get a better standard of life with like better income in and of itself. I rest my case.
Lovely. We thank the speaker for that speech. We welcome the third proposition speech. Here.
Okay, am I audible?
Loud and
Okay, yeah. I begin my speech in three, two, one. Okay, basically, what you get from the two speeches from negative clashing with ours is that they think that, firstly, a lot of people might not be able to match up to the market needs. That is to say, there's some consistent evolution of these markets, and that means that these people shall not be able to match up. Firstly, they give some sort of analysis saying that these people get equipped with things like developmental skills, that is to say, working with neighbors, and these things help them keep in the market. Firstly, we take this out by giving you analysis on people need something new. That is to say, interviews have changed to the motive of what you bring to the table. Simply things like teamwork or things like, working with other people or, being able to sustain yourself in a work environment are not things that already stand out at the end of the day. It means that people need people who are willing to go an extra mile just beyond their extra degree. That is to say, a lot that you get from the degree, a lot of characterization that you get from the degree is that at least you get a soft touch on life or a better viewpoint. Firstly, we tell you that the market is no longer willing to accept those people. Why? There's already a dominance, and that is to say, a lot of people already existing in society have these skills, and there's already a dominance of them. Secondly, a lot of people in these offices, even in itself, are not willing to shift. That is to say, they are going to be there for particular years. Why? They do what they do at their best. That means a lot of people, that's why you find a lot of complaints, or maybe a lot of people are in office and they are not getting out. That means in such a work environment, to be able to break through, it is to have something that then exceeds others. Even when they argue that we need them to depend on them, we think the dependency is more on the practical part. Understand that even when they present their case, it becomes more, it gives us more of a visual picture, as if things like vocational skills basically mean that you're working on a small scale or you can never advance, or maybe you're working on just, small things at the end of the day. Understand that vocational skills itself looks at who then actually executes this kind of skill. Sorry, it actually means that if a person is able to execute their skill to the best level, this is why you find things like stamps are existing. That is literally a vocational skill given a magnified point of view. That means at all we think that both sides, a person can still develop themselves if at all they work on it. But you see, the problem is if at all the market needs are moving to a person who is more practical in nature, that is to say, a person who has sort of an added advantage. Leaving alone the theoretical part of what theory gives you, a lot of people have that. A lot of companies have that. A lot of people have that dominating in the market itself. It means what they need is something that is new, that kind of, motivates them to actually keep moving on. They are more likely to prioritize a person who's willing to bring practical skills. Why? It is in itself a person who is willing, to handle their things like production, like marketing. That one thing they don't understand is that vocational skills themselves are practical. That means someone could even be specializing in a practical thing like marketing, like production, and those are very vital sectors. When someone has sort of specialization in sectors that are very vital for production, they are more likely to sell in the market than a person who has sort of not so much to bring, or if at all a person is studying what is already in society and stuff like that. That is why you find the number of teachers are increasingly declining. Why? A lot of people feel that it's already a dominant sector in the market. People need something new, or people need something new that you bring to the table. The other point of clash is cost. But no, what you get from their side is that firstly, they are loans. These loans are got off our salaries, of which we still question what if someone cannot get the job? The more likelihood of not them getting it is that the skill they are providing is already dominant in society. That means their opportunity is already limited by several people who already occupy those offices, who do their job well because they don't want to be replaced. Secondly, a lot of people who have probably also put in a lot of resources to match up to the standards that they needed. Thirdly, a lot of people that are maybe putting in even more things like corruption, or maybe people who are actually, going an extra step to get vocational energy. That means such a person is more likely not to get income. And on that point of view, such a person still has to pay things like loans. But in itself, if you have to look at it on the other flip end, other people to be able to accept these loans, it's not like a free will. If it was that, then every citizen will actually be going to university. But it also goes to some qualifications. That means that supposedly what education has termed as dull people shall not be able to get those loans. Why? They think that these people are not going to be able to succeed to be able to pay back. And that's quite problematic because such people stay redundant. Such people have probably also studied to the level that they need to do something. We also show you that the nature of the people in society, the people that need some sort of help. That is to say, they need some sort of new life or new direction, leaving alone what has already failed in their measure. We think the fact that they status quo, rest, we think that the fact that they support status quo was to actually mechanize what then they feel that their method still something that can run these people without vocational studies. Understand? From vocational studies, rest, what we give you from vocational studies is at all something that is more practical, something that is more convincing. Even when you might argue that these people have the same skill, are getting the same skills, we already explained to you in the way speech. Even when I make a cake, it's not going to be the same as the other person, which means that we are told the same skills, but the methodology with which we enact it is quite different. And that makes us stand out. That allows us to integrate in a highly competitive capitalistic sector, which enables us to provide something new. Why something new is very important? We already provide that in our speeches, showing you that when there is already a dominance in society, people need something that is different to be able to consider you for markets, to be able to associate with you on terms of employment. We also feel that it still does not pay out for a lot of people who cannot match up to get loans because for the fact that they are not wise enough. And those people then are left to what society then terms as dull people or terms as people could not be able to sustain themselves. We show you, and this already shows you a concession that there is some sort of cost efficiency. Also, it even becomes more costly because understand it's not about going to a university, it's about going to a quality university. Trust me, a lot of lawyers a lot of people aspiring to be lawyers probably want to go to Makere. Why? They think the quality comes from there, which basically means Makere has a higher price tag it has to term to the quality it produces. That basically means that you even make it harder for them to even access this. On top of making it harder, you want to give them loans and put some stuff called academic qualification. On top of that, it even becomes more challenging for the fact that they are not very sure if what they are studying is really something in society. Is something that society will consider. I mean, we have already seen instances where people are already in university and new curriculum says that we have cut off music and yet someone is studying music. That shows you that some theoretical parts of what then university gives you so much, because it focuses on a broader extent, a lot of things keep running out of society, or people finding that they're aging or they are no longer things that are viable. But thirdly, they say that they feel that with a lot of less professionals in society, you're more likely to have sort of depletion in services and stuff like that. But no, engagement on this is that we think that vocational services still provide services. That is to say, even when you may argue that people are not going to be doctors, we feel a lot of people can do specialize in specific things in vocational sector that handle medics. I mean, we already have researchers that have done vocational studies. We already have nurses, midwives who have gone in the vocational sector, which even like specializes on specific skills. So the comparatives on the two worlds keep showing you that would rather go for a more practical, more viable method in society that is more likely to be accepted. Thank you so much.
We thank the speaker for that speech. We welcome the last substantive speech for this round. Here.
Am I audible?
Loud and clear.
Okay, cool. So, that's right. Okay. So my speech begins in 3, 2, 1, go. This debate is not just about individual choices, but about what is best for society as a whole. While the proposition focuses on things like practicality of vocational education, I think we have shown that traditional college degrees offer unparalleled long-term benefits and an extrinsic value. I'll now weigh the arguments to show you why our side prevails. But before I do that, let's do a certain level of like clarity. Yeah. I don't think the debate can happen if proposition will always argue that people will entirely never go to the traditional colleges. I think it then requires them to be more charitable and tell us why then even when people can go to these sorts of like traditional colleges, it is something that is comparatively bad, right? But then even so, I'm going to show you why then even when they raise on things like people being able to go to traditional colleges, why then we still beat them at that. Let's first engage with Prop 1. Yeah. Prop 1 comes and says, you know what? They're going to bring expertise to equip students with these sorts of like skills. I think this is why they lose. We tell you what happens within traditional colleges is you create these skills within these individuals. That essentially means you don't need to continue importing labor as proposition wants to always do. That is why Lamoro gives you an example of within 2018 where we had to import doctors. The reason as to why this is very key within this debate, I don't get why then even within LDCs when we have to import doctors, they claim that there's job saturation. Like I don't get why that is like intuitive. Then secondly, from Sami's speech, she says there's already societal perception. Why does this knife her case? For you to present a model, you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt that individuals are going to buy into this model. She already shows you why there is going to be less buying within this model. The impact is less individuals then going to school. The impact is individuals then becoming poorer comparatively within our, because they say there is good perception about traditional colleges. We think it's something that is good that individuals within status quo are ready to incur the costs. Why are the costs justified? Notice two things is that the jobs that come out of traditional colleges are high paying, but also two, they are sustainable. To that extent, even when you argue for things like you have to pay a lot, I think it's something that is justified on that level that you're going to get something more within the future. Thirdly, on the whole idea of like saturation employment, notice within status quo, areas like Karamoja have mothers dying because they don't have doctors. I don't think it's true that Uganda is already filled with doctors. I don't think it's true that Uganda is already saturated with lawyers. They don't give us proof to like necessarily prove that. Why do we think their side then creates saturated employment? We tell you individuals are going to be equipping themselves with specific skills, with bakery, with knitting. This creates a certain level of saturation within status quo because these are easy things to do, right? Everyone is going to want to do them. The impact then is that the employment within their world is significantly limited because everyone wants to do that easy thing at the end of the day. Prop 2. Prop 2 says that they are catering for individuals without resources. Notice, I tell you, we need to put into consideration the fact that individuals within status quo are able to achieve these things. But then too, I think we cater for people without resources more within our side of the house. Why? Because we are able to make sure that they get high paying jobs, but also two, we're able to make sure that they get sustainable jobs at the end of the day. Secondly, on certainty of jobs, they never give you analysis to tell us why then jobs within their side are certain, right? Why probably just jump into the job market. Cynthia gives you analysis to how within that sort of world, they are already established brands, right? What this essentially means, for you to venture within that world, it's something that can't happen, or it's something that is less likely to happen. The impact then that has within that sort of the house is that the certainty of you having a job is significantly less. Within our world, we've never had enough doctors, we've never had enough lawyers. There's no way they can claim for things like the job is not going to be certain at the end of the day. Sadly, they come and say these guys are going to be out competed by the people already existing at the end of the day. Notice, this is like counterintuitive within their side of the house because they say a certain individual has a certain skill. So this is going to be the only individual gaining the market at the end of the day. What this essentially means, individuals that enrolled for that particular skill are losing out. Many individuals are not going to be earning because we all enrolled for that particular skill. The impact then that has on their side of the house is that you create more unemployment, but also two, individuals are not able to adapt. And I'm going to show you within my classes why that becomes key. Let's go to prop 3, right? So prop says that, you know what, the likelihood of getting a job is significantly less. I get this. They say that these individuals already have the skills and within our world, all those sorts of things. I think like there's something we need to understand. I think is on why the cost is justified, right? The cost is in most cases justified because the job you're going to get is high paying, but also two, it is sustainable. We think even when there is a greater cost within our side of the house, it's better because these individuals are going to get high paying jobs and all those things. There are two problems that exist within their world. Is that you only get a basic skill, but also two, these are skills that everyone that is in that school is getting. What that essentially means, you're not any special, even when they try to paint you as special in most cases. Let's go to the clashes, right? The first clash I want to engage is on how within our world, because they don't give us who is pursuing, so let's assume it's government, right? On how our world, governments are able to engage in global economics. Now, notice why this is important. It's not a far-fetched clash, right? The reasons why governments care about things like education is because literacy within a country is directly proportional to how that country is able to develop. That is why governments will go on and do things like public schools. There are two key things here. We tell you on our side that individuals are able to gain this sort of like cross-field skills within the traditional colleges and all that. Prop says, no, these guys should go and learn how to make door mats. The way up is like quite simple. Let's say in their world they make door mats. Let's say in our world we have individuals being equipped with these sorts of skills. I think our world is better on like two grounds. Is that we do not continue importing necessities, but we export. Notice this is important for any country that is supposed to develop because of things like being able to gain taxes. But also, two, this is important for any country that is readily able to be engaging with global economics because within a sort of side of the house, we have individuals sitting onto things like the United Nations Court of Justice, right? The impact this then has is that Uganda in and of itself is able to actively engage within global economics. The comparative within their side of the house that we keep producing people making door mats, we have to import the threads and all those things. There's a clash that exists within this debate, right? On accessibility and how equal education is. Prop says that within their world, education is more accessible, low income and others. Notice, they already give us that advantage and say people actively want to enroll within the traditional colleges. What that essentially means is that it's accessible within status quo, but also two, there's an incentive to make it accessible because it is the most important. I give you an example of government doing things like public schools. The way up then is like quite simple within this argument, right? Notice within their world, you create an education that perpetuates inequality. Why is this true? Individuals that come from poor backgrounds are limited to low-paying jobs. The problem within this argument is that people within their world continue becoming poor comparatively to our world, where you have the skills to necessarily venture into a highly paying job. The other clash is on who then is able to create a world that is more adaptable at the end of the day, right? There are two key things here. I think A, we are able, prop says that you just want immediate markets because there are basic principles and all those things. We tell you the foundational skills enable you to necessarily be flexible. I think the way up is quite simple. In our world, where we have things like automation, those things you're baking, there are machines that are coming up that can bake them. That embroidery you're doing, there are machines that are coming up that can embroider them. The impact within our world is that you're able to adapt within that changing society. The impact is A, there is job security, but also two, you have a high-paying job that is necessarily like sustainable within that regard. To the extent that they don't engage in the chat that even within status quo, people go to these schools, they can't win this debate. I beg to rest.
Thank you for that speech. Let's have the opposition reply.
Okay. I'm going to hold on. I have to cough again. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to start my speech now. So, panel, a few. Cynthia, stop laughing. Anyway, a few things I'm going to do in my speech, but first, let me engage on the new matter that Blessing brings out in his whip speech, right? He comes and he talks about, oh, hi, we're more likely to like have unemployment on our side of the on our side of the house because there's a dominance that exists within the job market, right? Notice, panel, how I'm able to show you in my speech that even within the very beautiful utopia of a world, there is still a sense of dominance. That is to say, there are still businesses that have monopolized markets of this particular vocational institute. That essentially shows you that one, employment is something that is less likely, but even two, if you're to opt out onto the other, only existing alternative on the side of the house, which is to own your own business, there is still a level of competition that you can't beat. That essentially shows you that one, the quality of jobs that you get from your side of the house are less likely to solve the problem that they characterize of like some sort of like poor standards of living, or second, like the whole idea of like economic impact, right? So on to the debate now that have dealt with the new matter that we've decided it was very smart to bring in his speech, right? I think Glenn becomes the most relevant speaker from his side of the house. Key things we get from his speech, right? He talks about one, the whole idea of expenses. But Chair, to an extent where I'm able to show you how the expenses can be mitigated and how why it's a and why the period of paying loans is a justifiable trade-off to the extent where I'm able to have some sort of like sustainable standard of living or a constant inflow of like capital. I think we're able to like deal away with that, right? But then secondly, he also talks about the whole idea of like employability in and of itself, and like basically the demonization that exists with people who don't go to these particular things, right? We tell you one, that's exactly why we prefer a world with traditional quality systems, because vocational institutions in and of itself are already demonized. That essentially shows you why I'm less likely to get a job. But then even when I get a job, there's that impact that it has because I'm looked at as a bad person. That inherently shows you that the things that Glenn talks about, like depression in and of itself, or discontentment with yourself, its existence on your side of the house, to an extent where they were able to prove to you that society in and of itself demonizes these particular people, right? That basically takes out the entire case, right? Because the whole idea is like the argument for urgency, right? I think then when with urgency that Samrawit brings, and like none of the speakers follow up, I'm able to show you that one, even when you do acquire these skills, there's a level of competition that already exists within the market. You're less likely to get a job. But then secondly, with the idea of automation that exists within status quo, that means that the machines machines that can make doormats now, the machines that can knit sweaters now, for Christ's sake, you're less likely to get the particular benefits that you get. That essentially means even if we take them at like that essentially means that they're less likely to solve the problem of urgency, right? But even when we take them at their best, right? I think I'm able to show you in the long run how these particular jobs, you're less likely to advance within these particular jobs that you get after going to vocational skills, and how that inherently becomes a bad thing, right? So what do we exclusively get from outside of the house? I think one, I'm able to show you how like these traditional colleges have like a wider range of education in and of itself. This becomes important because of the nature of the changing job market. That is to say, I'm able to get transferable skills in and of itself. I am not specialized or hinged. Notice this is the one problem that we have with that side of the house, the element of specialization and tying yourself to one particular job, no engagement whatsoever on that. Which on our side of the house, there's like there is no like that sort of like idea of like specialization in and of itself. So you're able to get like transferable skill, you're able to transfer from one job to another. But then secondly, you're able to meet with a competitive job market and the changing job market. But then last but not leastly, on the quality of employment that you get, right? Notice also, panel, on the extrinsic benefits on what we essentially like give society in and of itself. Since Hussein does a lot to show how society is lacking in certain aspects and why that becomes inherently good. But then on like the state in and of itself, and it's like its competitiveness on global economics, I think we're able to show you that in our speech. That we've been proud to pose.
We thank the speaker for that speech. We welcome the last reply speech from Side Talk in this debate. Here.
Share my audio.
Yes, you are audible. I can hear you. I just think she has something sorting out. So just I can hear you. Hello.
So
Samroid.
one. I know for so long people have been taking this traditional yes, dreams. Am I breaking?
No, continue.
Okay, so let me switch that. So I'm going to set my speech in three, two, one. Sure, I understand that for so long people have been taking this traditional families, it's something important. Opposition fails to show us to what extent in terms of magnitude.
Samri, you are breaking majorly. Please do what I told you to do at the start. Hopefully it works again. Samrawit. 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 Okay. Oh man, and I believe she's speaking. She's giving her speech, but we just can't hear it.
At least her voice doesn't sound like Folamara. So yeah.
Positive reactions. Why? Because people already have this employment opportunity. They don't need to stand before an office with 1,000 applicants who are still who are applying for the same role of being an engineer, but rather go ahead and probably fix the job situation at the end of the day. But then, oh no, yes,
Amrawiti.
You were
um,
breaking. We lost you after like the very first 30 seconds of your speech.
30. Wow, wow.
One more. We didn't even hear 30 seconds.
And okay, let me just restart. Let me try moving. Yo, is this better?
Yes, it
Stand
is.
there. Don't
Oh god.
move. Stand there.
Toba. Oh.
Can't live. Okay, so I'm going to restart. Oh, okay, in three, two, one. Share. For so long, people have been taking these traditional college degrees, and very many people have them. That is why the chat about saturation of unemployment within these countries, and probably like the idea of dominance that exists within the within the job market, inherently premises from. We tell you from our side of the house, clear things. What do they come and tell? Like what does opposition come and say? That we think that at a point in time when individuals are supposed to actually get this employable skills. They think they say it's unlikely for them to actually have like better standards of living because I mean they are basic skills like in terms of like what they say. Opposition inherently assumes that you can like once you have basic skills you can't grow them. Understand, Chair, that at a point in time when you have this vocational like education, you're able to grow them because you are always you always have this hands-on experience, but you're always questioned on how creative and like critical, like how you critically think in the vast majority of cases. We tell you, for example, if James and like Cynthia learned how to bake, James is going to like bake triangular cakes, and Cynthia is going to like bake circular cakes. At a point in time, you have a variety of options within like the job market, as compared, like you're going to probably take this traditional college degree in medicine, and you're going for a corporation to actually hire cardiologists. That each and every sort of cardiologist actually knows what to do. So there is no incentive for you to actually go ahead to actually take that job, or it's unlikely because of the great dominance that exists. What is then do we tell you? We tell you that we show you the societal perception and agency to help these marginalized and low income families. We ask like the question from upside is that to what extent or like in terms of magnitude can they help the very many people who actually have that difficulty? Best case scenario from their side of the house is that these people actually get this education, they actually have the accessibility and finances. What then happens, Chair, is that due to the dominance and like saturated unemployment that exists, it's very unlikely for these individuals to actually help their families. We tell you how these people need the agency to actually help their marginalized and low income families in terms of providing for them their basic needs in the vast majority of cases. The magnitude of impact from our side of the house then becomes is that we are able to actually help very many poor families to actually get these jobs, right? Because they're able to use their abilities rather than sitting in a whole class, a class for like 4 or 5 years, the vast majority of cases. I take time within my characterization to explain to you why vocational education also have short programs that are very like better than these traditional like programs that have longer duration in the vast majority of cases. The agency that these individuals need where their families cannot actually live on like people like their families live on one meal per day are going to strain their families to get those resources. Even if when they get the resources and they finish like those 5 years, at a point in time, they know there is no guarantee they're going to actually get that job. What that necessarily means is that you're going to be mentally stressed and psychologically damaged in the vast majority of cases from opposition walls within this. They come and say that, oh, we think that you need those soft skills, the communication and stuff like that. I think Glenn does perfect to actually explain to you why that is like even from our side better. Because a teacher won't just come and tell you, oh, like make a chair and just go, but actually incentivize each and everyone to actually you have team and like collaboration, like collaborative action to actually do that. But they come and claim and say that, oh, there are low standards of living. Panel, simple comparative. Yeah, are you going to actually be settled at home after receiving the degree of 4 5 years because you don't get a job and you're going to sit at home for 2 years as compared to a person who's going to probably be earning like 100 or 200K like every month because they're able to actually bake wonderful cakes at the end of the day? I think that is very like a normal average like intelligent voter can actually get that. From our side of the house, what we tell you is simple. The societal perception that exists has created great pressure, like for individuals to take on that degree. We tell you at a point in time when you fail to like take this on, you're seen as the loser, like you're seen as the loser, you're like you're deemed unimportant and lazy within society. At a point in time when you incentivize individuals to actually pursue vocational education, you're able to change the societal perception, but you're also able to actually enable people get these skills. And at the end of the day, we show you why these people inherently are going to actually have positive reaction because they're able to self-actualize and because they help their families out of these poverty shackles, but then also they're able to actually have their better standards of living. With that kind of, we couldn't be more proud for individuals to pursue vocational education rather than a traditional degree education that has lasted like for over a century. With that, I beg to rest.
We thank the speaker for that speech. My darling panelists, do you mind moving us to where we're supposed to deliberate from? See, Um, Hi guys. Yes, so good evening once again. We are back. I'm just gonna go through general feedback and then I'm gonna give the verdict and then I'll go ahead to give the justification for the verdict and then the different personal feedback according to speaker roles within the round. So, general feedback, I think it's crucially important for us to follow through with logical links within our speeches or within our arguments. That is to say, the extent to which a team doesn't prove something, how are you able to prove it on your end, or how are you able to make it much more valuable on your end? I think then the other thing would be being able to understand speakers' arguments and try to relate how they connect to the debate and what value they create to the debate to make sure that your engagement does not only engage your engagement does not only address the trivial issues within that argument, but it goes as far as engaging the premise to prove the end goal of the argument in itself. I think the other thing would just be for third speeches. We think that as a panel, there's pretty good responses within third speeches. However, you miss out on the core of like what third speeches ought to look like, which is the aspect of weighing. So in as much as we can credit the rebuttal and the contribution the rebuttal has to the round, how much does it do in terms of the speaker role in itself, weighing the debate and showing why there's a tilt in terms of those clashes to your side of the house or to the other party side of the house. That is all for general feedback. So for the call on a unanimous, we did have side proposition over side opposition. So simple clashes within this round. First thing we think was on the idea of jobs. Right. So the analysis that we do get from like past speeches from proposition is to say you give individuals capacity to A, create their own jobs, but two, to navigate easily the job market because of the nuance that exists within the skills that individuals are sort of to say existing in. A particular sort of analogy that we do credit or we do love in terms of job creation is just the intuitive idea that hey, you get out of school, you can start within like your garage. Why is this important? This argument addresses the most vulnerable stakeholder within the debate for side proposition, who is like the minority, the broke people that don't really have the money. What does this mean for them? They argue for why you give them like agency to exist within those very spaces to a minimal extent, but they're also able to have like stable incomes. I think the most that we do get in terms of analysis A is the idea on what the job market looks like. So I think there is great analysis in terms of like flexibility on the job market and how there's a lot of like evolvement that is happening. To that regard, it's sort of to say ensures that people have the capacity to get employment within those particular spaces. However, my question still on the idea of flexibility is the extent to which you say society is evolving. Is things like the job description, the job requirement as well changing? The only additive is to say, oh, there is now things like technology that are coming up, machinery that are coming up that need a certain level of nuance to operate in. The extent to which these guys are not adapting on side proposition, also why is it true that at your end you're able to adapt to these things? It's one thing to concede to the existence of something or to prove the existence of something, but we think the extent to which there's heavy analysis or there's a heavy burden on side prop to prove why their side works or why there is a level of like adaptability on their side, the same burden still applies to the team that is able to mechanize why that flexibility exists, why that adaptability is something that is true. So the clash is not credited on twofold. The first fold is the idea that you're unable to prove why at your end there is that there is that adaptation to the flexibility in the market. But second thing is that we are constantly questioning when you say there is flexibility, there's evolvement, there's addition of new things. Is the description within the job in itself like changing and the like? Why do we then have those questions? There is analysis to show why there is like heavy concentration of the job market from side proposition. I think they're able to analyze to you why you have like 20,000 doctors graduating out of a university and they're all still going within that particular job market. Even when you do say, oh, a country like Uganda is trying to import Cuban doctors and the like, it does not take away from the fact that there are still people who are actively graduating from these universities and don't have employment. It does not take away from the analysis on how the job market within itself is saturated with people having the same thing. So where is the nuance, or where is the tilt that goes to side prop? They say in as much as that exists,
Hi,
the dead.
Cynthia. Yeah.
Yes, Jen? Yes.
Can I just drop off? If any of the speakers requires feedback, they can message me. I just need to get to something real quick.
Okay, that's fine, my darling.
All right. Au revoir.
Bye. Yeah. So I was just explaining where the deadlock is. So where they break the deadlock now is to show, in as much as there's that concentration on